Hi everyone! Imagine you arrived at the chemistry department of your university. You are overwhelmed by all the new subjects. Some have such funky names that you may never heard before. One of them is surely biochemistry, one of the key studies of today's chemistry world. If you are confused and have no idea what's going on, don't worry, you are not alone. Only a few freshmen immediately grasp the concept behind biochemistry. Why do we need it? Does everyone need it? The brutally honest answer is yes. Biochemistry is one of the subjects which remains with you until the very end of your studies. The more important question is, what is the practical demand of it? In this video, we are going to answer all these questions for you. And the main surprise from the very scratch, a deep knowledge of organic chemistry does not guarantee your understanding of biochemistry and its features. And here is why. Over its more than 100 years of history, biochemistry has managed to become a completely independent study. It would be even wrong to perceive it as a branch of chemistry. It has its subject of research, its methodology. It generally has everything of its own. You might ask, why is it so special and even diverged into a subject of its own? It's actually not diverged at all, but here you need to understand the main point. Biochemistry is not the same as chemistry. Even the bachelor's degree is often divided into chemical and biochemical sections, because they are not just different fields of studies, they are fundamentally different ways of thinking.
Classical organic chemistry is more about how strong the covalent bonds are between the atoms in molecules. And the main thing you will have to face in biochemistry are non-covalent intermolecular interactions between the macromolecules.
And here is where the fun begins. This all happens inside living organisms. As a result, biochemistry not only becomes a subject of its own, it also consists of content from a huge number of other disciplines. For instance, organics, you can't get away from it, cell biology, biophysics, supramolecular chemistry. Biochemistry also has its own experimental methodology. So what is biochemistry without going deeply into details? Biochemistry is a science that studies chemical and physical phenomena and processes in living organisms. This is very generally speaking. However, if biochemistry is such a specific subject, why do we chemists need it at all? The thing is, the world's top universities have long come to the conclusion that all chemists, without an exemption, do need biochemistry. Of course, this has to do with the further application of this knowledge. And we can say with complete confidence, if your job has anything to do with chemistry, biochemistry will not leave you alone. You cannot achieve anything in the field of chemistry without understanding the basics of biochemistry.
When I finished my first semester of bachelor study in Munich, I had an internship in the US, in the UIUC University, in the group of Professor Dr. Sarlach. And this group is dealing with total synthesis of huge organic molecules. But I was personally involved in the project in this group that was dedicated to the high throughput synthesis of small organic molecules that are the possible targets for the future drug design. And this is a perfect example how the organic chemistry research, the fundamental organic chemistry research, is valuable for the biochemistry. Actually, there are many examples how biochemistry can benefit from the fundamental research in pure chemistry fields. For instance, I had finished my research internship in the group of Professor Niese, who is famous for his theoretical chemistry investigations. But my subgroup has dealt with photosystem II, which is the main component of chlorophyll, which is responsible for oxygen production in the world. We have studied the structure and the mechanisms of how photosystem II works. And this knowledge is vital when we are speaking about the synthesis of artificial photosynthetic systems.
So we're not developing, let's say, universal laws like a physicist might try, but the idea is to figure out regular principles and mechanisms which are, true beyond that individual context in which you're studying it. And of course, this has implications to various aspects of biotechnology, disease, biomedical research. And I think in this context, it's probably also worth mentioning that biochemistry is not an isolated discipline, right? Where people train to become a biochemist and then you're a biochemist for your entire life. Maybe that was true 40, 50 years ago, but every biochemist uses molecular biology techniques. Some of biochemists are maybe more at the intersection with chemistry, but a lot of work at the intersection with biology, neurobiology, genetics, immunology.
There's a logical explanation for the popularity that biochemistry has, and it's not only related to the development of this field itself, but also because of the people who are generally interested in not only their nature, but also in the preservation of their own health. That is why a lot of money and time is invested now in biochemistry and pharmaceuticals researches. Nowadays, these areas are a kind of hype, and yes, hype is also very welcomed in science. So this creates a whole trend in global research. Therefore, even in the other fields of studies that have a slight similarity with biochemistry, the researchers try to comply with it. Meaning, at the stage of formulating research questions, topics and themes, researchers try to somehow select them so that they satisfy the needs of biochemistry. Just to give you some good examples, here are the Nobel laureates of recent years. A number of them received their awards for the application of the results in the field of biochemistry. Like Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna, both received the Nobel Prize in 2020 for their contribution to their own invention made in 2012. I'm talking about molecular scissors, which will help create new treatments for cancer, as well as hereditary diseases. And here is another example. Jacques Dubochet, Richard Henderson and Joachim Frank received their award for the development of high-resolution cryo-electron microscopy and received about 1 million euros from the Nobel Committee for this. In simple words, these people have invented technology that has brought us closer to understanding the very essence of biological processes. Long story short, thanks to it, researchers are able to freeze biomolecules mid-movement and visualize processes they have never previously seen. So it enhances our understanding of how this or that pill works and whether it's possible to invent something better. And perhaps an example that many are hearing now, the Nobel Prize for Asymmetric Catalysis. David Macmillan and Benjamin List were honored for inventing a catalyst that makes medicines without side effects and without polluting the environment. So as you may see, biochemistry is really kind of booming branch. What is it studying which is so important that humanity desperately needs it? Biochemistry tries to answer the most important questions about how the living organisms function. Where did life come from? How does it reproduce itself? And what is death? The last one is actually a much more tricky question, as you may think. How does the human brain work and why do we experience different emotions? Why are we getting older? Or, for example, getting sick with something, be it cancer or coronavirus? And most importantly, can we people influence any of that? We asked a biochemistry student from one of the best universities in Germany, LMU, to tell us about life at the faculty where biochemistry is studied. And that's what he told us.
At the moment, chemical research is really very much oriented towards biochemistry. You can do things like bioorganic or bioinorganic chemistry, and vice versa. With theoretical chemistry, you can also calculate structures like biomolecules and so on. As part of the bachelor's degree at our university, there are 3 lectures on biochemistry, namely Introduction to Molecular Biology and Cellular Biology, Foundations of Metabolism, Enzymology and Drug Development, Advanced Theoretical Aspects of Protein Biochemistry, Practical Lab course for biochemists, where typical basic experiments are carried out, such as how to do a PCR test, how to clone cells. Of course, something exploded during our internship. It always happens in every internship that someone breaks something. We're students, and above all, we are people. We're not flawless. I would say you don't need that much previous knowledge, but the more previous knowledge you bring, the better. That was mainly previous math knowledge, but also various things in chemistry. The people who are interested in biochemistry are usually more interested in metabolism and everything related to the human body and human cells. But it's not just about metabolism, although metabolism and physiology are of course also very interesting. But it includes more things: genetics, cancer development, and generally studying different diseases. So you shouldn't think that it's just about diets, metabolism and so on. So for people who are up for medical things, but still don't want to study medicine as a subject, I would highly recommend biochemistry.
Okay, let's say you became graduated biochemist. What can you do with that? What are your prospects? What can you do later if you are well versed in such a tricky field as biochemistry? And here you have a great deal of different fields and professions to choose from.
I'm a biologist by training, and then I did my PhD at the Max Planck Institute for Biochemistry here. I then moved to the UK for postdoctoral research. I returned to Munich then as a tenure-track professor here at the Gene Center for Cellular Biochemistry. What I really enjoyed in high school in the final years was learning about molecular biology, about how a gene is transcribed into mRNA, how that is then translated into the protein. I've been running my lab here now since roughly 4 years, and I teach courses in the Bachelor for Chemistry and Biochemistry and also in the Master of Biochemistry program. We're interested in DNA repair. So the DNA in all of our cells encodes the genetic information, and this information is permanently threatened by damage. For example, by UV light, but also by reactive metabolites, reactive agents produced by our own metabolism, which change sequence and structure of the DNA molecule. And it's very important for cells to detect these damages and repair them, because if it fails, this can cause aging, it can cause the formation of tumors, the formation of cancer. So we're trying to identify all the factors, the proteins in our cells which are involved in this process. So I enjoy it a lot because, you can work with motivated young people. It's quite a thrill if they experience for the first time to figure something out on their own. And of course, it allows also me to follow much more interests, right? We can run 10 projects in parallel, and there's always one which, where is exciting stuff going on. And so I enjoy it a lot.
I have studied biochemistry in Tübingen, and then for my doctoral thesis, I went to the Max Planck Institute of Biochemistry in Munich, collaborated at the time already with Roche. In 2010, I joined the Roche Innovation Center in Zurich to work on cancer immunotherapy. So we are developing their bispecific antibodies for immunotherapy. We are doing this from the early stages, really the discovery, to moving these molecules forward into clinical development. And are confident that also some of those drug candidates, hopefully in the future, will be used in the clinical setting. Yeah, at Roche, I think we do a lot of research that you maybe could also find in an academic environment. But of course, the focus is a little bit different in the sense that, we really have the purpose of developing a drug candidate that can enter into clinical trials and hopefully come on the market. So we do applied research really with the purpose of drug discovery. Of course, now all our people, they have worked in academia before. And for our scientists, the majority of those either has done a postdoc before. There may also, or they even come also directly after their PhD. I think typically we would rather hire somebody with a specific expertise we are looking for.
Well, I hope that we have given you guys a couple of insights, and now you have a better understanding of what awaits you if you, after all, decide to study such a complex but necessary and even mysterious discipline as biochemistry. Leave your ideas for the next videos in the comments. Your likes are always most welcomed, and you should definitely visit our chemical forum. You'll find there a lot of interesting things, more than you expect. See you soon. Bye.